You're listening to TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour with your host, the director of Dixie Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
I don't think that a week goes by that I'm not surprised or pleased to find out who it is that subscribes to the Dixie Heritage Letter. And here a couple of weeks ago, I found out that Brent Smith, the syndicated columnist, is a subscriber to the Dixie Heritage Letter. And he had even sent an article that appeared in one of our newsletters. It was his article on the Second Amendment and how if the other 9 amendments in the Bill of Rights apply to the individual, does not the Second Amendment apply to the individual as well? And so, once again, I was pleasantly surprised to find out that this columnist was a subscriber to our newsletter. So I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, Brent," I said, "how would you like to be a guest on the Dixie Heritage Hour?" And he responded almost immediately. Within minutes, he answered my email. And he was just delighted by the prospect. So we set up a time, and a couple of days later, I Skyped him. And we had a very interesting conversation on a number of subjects. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take us straight into the interview with syndicated columnist Brent Smith. Morning.
Morning.
How are you today?
I'm doing quite well. How about you?
Oh,
I'm comfortable talking about virtually anything, which is why I get myself in trouble sometimes.
Okay.
Nice shotgun, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That was my father-in-law's.
Really? That's awesome. Yeah, I've got a nice tactical one in my right by my bedside. Point and shoot, brother.
Yeah. You know, even when I was a deputy sheriff, I carried a .357, a revolver.
Yeah, love them.
I mean, I had a semi-automatic, a 9mm.
Right.
But I preferred the revolver. Easier to operate, easier to clean.
Yeah, funny thing that they never jam.
Yeah.
You never get any chambering problems. My first gun was a .357. It was a little snub-nosed .357, and I loved it because when you went out to target shoot, you could use .38. There's not as much of a kick. After a half an hour, 45 minutes, you're not going to feel it in your shoulder. And it was a great revolver. And actually, it was. Oh man, who is the shooter? Why am I? Michalak turned me on to revolvers. And he just after watching him and whatnot, I just fell in love with the revolvers. I now carry a semi-auto 40 S&W, and it's just because of my sons gave it to me for Christmas several years ago. It's the only thing they could afford, so I put everything else away, and that's what I carry to basically honor them. Nice pistol, I like it, and it's a 40 caliber. It's easier to shoot than a 45. But it's got plenty of stopping power, so I really enjoy it. But the revolver, you're absolutely right. I'm a huge fan of revolvers.
And, the same thing with rifles, hunting and things. Just give me an old-fashioned bolt action.
Right. Yeah, it's not as if you're going to be stampeded by a bunch of water buffalo where you need a semi-automatic weapon to hunt with. I mean, it's just not going to happen. At least I don't think so.
Yeah, and it's not that I have any opposition to people. I mean, I'll tell you, my interpretation of the Second Amendment is that we should have everything that the government does. So it's not that I'm against people having anything else. It's just myself. I've always preferred simpler is better.
Absolutely. Well, simpler, there's less to go wrong, and that's why I'm a big fan of the AK. I would much rather have an AK than an AR. There's just more crap. There's less crap to go wrong. If you can drag an AK through a swamp or mud, or it doesn't matter what you put on it or in it, it's still going to fire. Just because they were made so crappily, if that's even a word. But because of that, the stamped metal and the loose tolerances and whatnot, they always work. Now, you're not going to get the accuracy of an AR because you got that extra kick, although the military has now figured out that the 5.56 is just not a very good round, and they are going to be upgrading to 7.62, NATO 7.62, very shortly, from what I understand. Okay. So anyway, how the hell did we get on this topic?
I don't know. So
yeah, well, see, this is verbal diarrhea, brother.
Okay, yeah. So you live in New Hampshire.
That is correct.
Okay, so that'll be my first question then. Well, have you always lived in New Hampshire, or is that just where you live now?
That is where I was brought. I was brought here by an ex-wife.
Okay, so where are you
and
from?
I stayed. I'm originally from the South, Atlanta. My father's family is from Sumter, Darlington area in South Carolina. But they've been living in Pennsylvania for a long time, small town outside of Willow Grove, Huntington Valley area, called Brynathan, and it's like a church community, for want of a better term.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of my relatives live now, because that's where the main hub of the church is. I'm basically Southern.
Okay.
I've been living in New England for a long time, and I've never gotten used to it. Don't care for it. Don't like the weather. My blood's too damn thin. It's just I'm not built for this, man.
Okay. Tell us about your time in the Navy.
Well, let's see. I joined basically out of a sense of obligation to serve my country, and patriotism, basically. And this was at I think it's the second term of Ronald Reagan. So it was damned easy to be patriotic. I mean, he made it real easy to want to join and serve. And that's what I did. But the interesting thing is that my dad was in the Army. All my uncles and stuff, they were all in the Army. I was the only one to ever join the Navy, from what I understand. But I had a fascination for it growing up. And I don't remember a hell of a lot of my childhood, but I do remember on my bedroom door growing up, I had plastered all over my door Fly Navy stickers. I don't even know where the hell I got them from, but I can see them in my mind right now. The blue with the yellow, and it just said Fly Navy, and they were all crisscrossed all over my door. And so when I got the opportunity, I joined. And I signed on the dotted line. And at the time, in the late 80s, there was a program that you sign up for 8 years. You do some active, you do some reserve, and then you do some inactive reserve. And then you can either re-up or get out. And the re-up obviously could happen at any time. I got out because I loved what I did. Everything I loved what I did, on board ship, off ship, everything, on book, off book, everything that I did, I loved. The actual physical part of being in the Navy. The politics, and not just, I guess not the bureaucracy, the red tape, not allowing the people that are trained to do what they do, not allowing them to do what they do without having to sign everything in triplicate and get the commander-in-chief's okay to take a crap, excuse my French, but I didn't like that bureaucracy. I got tired of it, and many of us did. And so after the 8 years I did a year and a half, I guess it was a year and a half or 2 years inactive or something like that, where I could have gotten called back at any time. I just got out because and it's too bad too. Real quick story. When I was in boot camp, and this is, the Israeli model where every kid, I think at the age of 18, they have to do 2 or 4 years or something like that in the military. Well, I'm not for forcing anybody in America to join the military. All right. It should be an all volunteer force because you want to be there. But they don't have a bad idea in doing that. And I'll tell you, when I went to boot camp, there were these guys from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Harlem. There was one kid from Harlem, and he had this kid in play haircut with the air. You could land a jet on top of it. It was flat up, looked like a top hat. And he thought that he was the coolest thing, this side of the Mississippi. He just thought he was badass, brother. You couldn't understand a word he said. It was just all Ebonics, and it was just a black kid, and he was, within 3 weeks, they broke this kid. He ended up being our company commander. And I got to tell you, he's probably still in now. He's probably a damn lifer. The transformation of that kid was so astonishing, and probably at least a third of them that I know, the transformations, because this kid, again, became our company commander. and then they had some unit or division commanders underneath. I was one of them. The transformation from this kid from the slums of Harlem to a buttoned up English speaking. I mean, it was, you can't believe that. And this was in light speed. Within 2 to 3 weeks, this kid was transformed and from a, you know what, to a sailor, to a patriot. And it was astonishing. Absolutely a stunning achievement. One of the best memories I had, I actually met Ronald Reagan and Cap Weinberger aboard the JFK on the flight deck of the JFK. They came aboard to do a re-enlistment ceremony for like 8 or 10 sailors. And I think this was Cap's last year, 87 maybe, or something like that. Thrill of a lifetime. And you couldn't believe the kids that were re-enlisting, the smiles on their faces when Reagan was up there reading the re-enlistment, and when he came over there and shook their hand and they saluted it just swelled your damn heart is what it did. It was just unbelievable, and it made me so proud to be an American I could have just bust a sing. So, any rate, that was my my time in the Navy. Again, some of the things that I remember most: night flight ops. Those were the most astounding things that you'd ever want to witness. Me and a buddy actually snuck up to the forecastle where the anchors were. You weren't allowed to be up there, particularly during night ops. And there was a port where one of the anchor chains went down, and it was directly underneath one of the catapults. And small wonder you weren't allowed up there, because you stuck your head out there, and one of the F-14s or FA-18s were coming out, and they would take off the catapult, and you could literally feel the hot gas from their exhaust in your face underneath them. We never got caught, but it was just that was an absolutely astonishing experience, and something that I'll certainly never forget is night ops. And the landing at night on a pitching deck is the most incredible feat you'd ever want to see. That these pilots don't get enough credit for what they do and the balls that they've got. Huge. I mean, to do what they do is just unbelievable. So like I said, my time in the Navy I was thrilled to be in, and I just wish that it hadn't have been so dadgum bureaucratic. Mm-hmm. Too bad, because I probably would have still been in.
So did you go straight from the Navy to writing then, or was there something else in between?
No. Basically, I'm actually taking time right now from my day job. I have a day job. I'm a general manager at a small company here in New Hampshire, in Manchester. And I still do that, and I enjoy what I do. But I write at night. I write on the weekends. I do podcasts, audio and video. I do audio articles and do my news site and submit to a bunch of different places and whatever. So that's what I do at night. I envision this as when I'm ready to give up my day job, as my second career. So it's one of those things where I just started doing it, and it just kind of blossomed into kind of what it is right now. I'm still a small-time chump, but I'm working on that too, with your help and things like that, which is terrific exposure, that is.
So then what possessed you, or why did you decide to launch the website and the blog and to start writing? Well,
that I'm going to credit 100% to my ex-wife. We actually get along better now. It's one of those things where we're good friends, but we could never live. It's like the War of the Roses, man. It just didn't work. So anyway, she does this stuff for a living. She's a counselor and a life coach for lots of people. Makes a very good living at it, and she's very good at what she does. So when we were married, towards the tail end, she came to me and said, "Look, you got to stop bitching about this political stuff. You're always complaining about what they're doing to our country. Why don't you do something about it? Do something." And I noticed that she started writing articles on what interested her, and then she wrote a book, And then she wrote another book, and so on and so forth. And I said, look, why, if she can do this, why can't I? And so I just picked up a pen and just started writing whatever I felt about politics. And that's what my passion was, and that's what my interest was. I've always been conservative. And so I just started writing. And then I didn't know. It's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what to fear, the failure.
Right.
So I went to WordPress. I set up my own website. And boy, howdy, I didn't know what I didn't know, man. I was literally out of my element. I had no clue what I was doing. But I did it. I set it up. And then I just started publishing articles. And pretty soon I found myself, I just went on the internet and I contacted different conservative websites and said, look, I'd like to submit something. What's your email address? And son of a gun, if some of them weren't receptive. And hell, even the Daily Caller. Go figure. I mean, it's just some schmo like me could write for the Daily Caller. Are you kidding me, man? Or WorldNet Daily or any number of these sites that accept my articles either on a regular basis or whatever. And so then I just started expanding, and I started doing a weekly audio podcast, and now I do a weekly video podcast on the weekend that publishes on Sunday. And I'll go out. I don't do it in front of my inside. I'll go outside when I can, if the weather permitting, up here in New England, that is. And I'll go outside and do something, either just walk through the woods and just talk about politics or whatever interests me at the time. Last week was the censorship and red flag laws, gun control, censorship, and red flag laws, the Facebook thing, and the if you're familiar with red flag laws, where the police can come in and actually by law, state law, they can come in and confiscate your weapon.
Well, they passed one in Florida here a few weeks ago, and I think it had been on the books for 6 hours, and the state troopers were already taking people's stuff.
Oh, that's just fabulous. Yeah. Well, it's like remember New Orleans. Same thing happened after Katrina. They came in, they busted in, and the state police and National Guard will bust into houses and just confiscate their weapons, no questions asked. I mean, there's something seriously wrong with that. Something seriously wrong. And basically what I try to continue to do. I do every article I write, I do an audio version, figuring that not everybody can sit down and read the article. Maybe they just want to download it. I put it up on YouTube and I put it up on SoundCloud. And so they can either, listen to it or read it or whatever. And that's been relatively successful. But it's something I enjoy doing, and it's something different. And then, again, I really enjoy doing the video podcast, particularly up here in New England. Last summer, last fall, I actually did something. It was, are you familiar with the Pine Tree Riot?
No, sir.
Up here in New Hampshire? Okay. It predates the Boston Tea Party by almost 2 years, by 20 months. And it's basically the unofficial kickoff. It was 1772, unofficial kickoff of the Revolutionary War. And it predated the Boston Tea Party by about 20 months. And so it was in New Hampshire, and it's about the road that it happened on is about a mile from my office. At my day job office, and a road called Mast Road, M-A-S-T Road. And the reason why it was called Mast Road was that the King of England they contracted out New Hampshire white pine logs because they were really straight and they were full of sap and whatnot to prevent decay. And they contracted out in the woods. They would force these lumber people in New Hampshire, the colonists, to cut down logs and transfer them on Mast Road for the King's masts. That's why they call it Mast Road, down to Portsmouth or down to Boston, and then they would ship them over to England to build ships. And so I followed the lead of down Mast Road to a place called Clement's Mill, where it all started, where you had to pay a fine for every log that didn't get broad marked or didn't get marked for the king, And if they caught you, they could fine you, they could jail you, they could do any number of things to the colonists, and it was just it was really running rampant. And I finally ended up at a place called Quimby Mill, where it all happened, where a couple of guys from New Hampshire refused to pay the king's fine, the king's fees, and so they dispatched a couple of sheriff's deputies up to Quimby Mill in New Hampshire to get these guys and arrest them. Well, the guy said, "Don't worry, I'll pay the fine tomorrow." Well, they had already hatched a plan that they were going to go in and beat the living crap out of these two sheriff's deputies and drive them out of town, which is exactly what they did. And it was the first basically armed insurrection of the colonists against the crown known. And this was, like I said, it predated the Boston Tea Party by about 20 months. And it was fascinating because I could actually drive up the road and I came right to Quimby's Mill or Quimby's Inn. And these are the types of things that I really enjoy if you like Revolutionary War trivia or Revolutionary War history.
If you love listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, then I know that you'll love reading the Barnes Review. The Barnes Review is one of my favorite magazines. I began reading the Barnes Review long before they became a sponsor here on the program. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There's just not a more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So if you'll visit www.barnesreview.org, that's www.barnesreview.org, you can find out how you too can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review by mail, or you can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review electronically in PDF editions. Or you can subscribe to receive both. That's what I do. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
Your user pick for Skype. I noticed you were wearing an NRA hat, so I'm guessing you're an NRA member.
That is correct, sir. And that was that's an easy pick for me. Obviously, I'm not a gun nut, but I'm a gun enthusiast, and I've been using weapons. I didn't grow up with a lot of them. My father owned an old 30-30 rifle. I owned a little 22, and we used to go out hunting varmints, so to speak, in the backyard and whatever. But it wasn't until I got into the Navy where I actually got to use a variety of firearms, both semi-automatic and automatic. And so I enjoyed them. I really liked them. But the point about the NRA is that it is a single advocacy organization. They don't do any like crossover. You know how the left, you get these pro-abortion groups that'll fight for illegal immigrants. What the hell does one have to do with the other?
Right.
Nothing, of course. It's just the leftist, nonsense that all ties together. It's a bunch of disparate groups that get together and form one big mass. Well, the NRA isn't like that. They don't care about anything else. They don't care. They don't worry about the abortion issue. They don't worry about anything else. Education, immigration, nothing. It's the Second Amendment, and it's the right to keep and bear arms. Oh, by the way, I've been observing this recent, and I don't know if it's a recent thing or whether I'm more sensitive to it. But when people talk about the Second Amendment, even conservatives, they write it or say it as the right to bear arms. No, it's not. It's the right to keep and bear arms. And I don't know whether this is a purposeful thing from the left that is trying to inject new dialogue or change the dialogue, because it's not a right. The right to keep and bear arms is the right to own and carry a weapon, correct?
Yes.
Of course. So you can own and carry a weapon. But if it's just the right to bear arms without the keep, then you have the right to carry a weapon. Well, you have the right to carry a weapon in the military when you're issued that weapon, correct? But until you're issued that weapon, you don't have the right. On many bases, you're not allowed to carry your own weapon. You're not allowed to carry a weapon, sidearm or otherwise. And this is what worries me, is that the dialogue is changing. And I don't know that anyone even knows that the dialogue is changing. But the Second Amendment is the right to keep and bear arms, not just to bear arms, to own and carry a weapon. It may be a small thing and it may be nothing, but to me, it's definitely something. And this is another thing, like I said, about the NRA. This is a single advocacy organization. You'll never see them advocating for anything else but gun owners' rights, the Second Amendment, and individual rights. That's it. That's what I love about the NRA.
Well, I know you had written an article that if the other 9 amendments in the Bill of Rights all pertain to the individual, why shouldn't the Second Amendment? Right, and that's I've actually never heard this argument presented this way before, and that's why I call myself the Common Constitutionalist, because I'm not trained in this stuff. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I didn't go to college for this kind of stuff. It's all self-taught. It's like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and those guys. They didn't go to school and do this. They learned on their own, and I think they're better for it because they had the passion to learn on their own. And so I keep my copy of the Pocket Constitution. I've got one in my coat pocket. I got one in my car. I have one on my desk. Everywhere I go, I keep a copy of the Pocket Constitution. And obviously the Bill of Rights is absolutely essential. And if you read anything from George Mason, who is my favorite anti-federalist, for want of a better term, you'll know that the Bill of Rights, the Constitution would never have been ratified without the Bill of Rights. And that's a known fact. And the interesting thing is that I pulled off, the reason why it should be obvious is that even the public broadcasting system, liberal PBS knows this. A while back, they did a series called the Liberty Chronicles. And you can go on their website, PBS website, and look up Liberty Chronicles, and it'll tell you all sorts of stuff. And on their website was a screenshot of, and I'll show it to you here in a second, a screenshot of a newspaper headline, front page headline from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, dated December 15th, 1791, and it pretty much tells the whole story. If you can read it. Yes, sir.
If you can't, it says, Congress adds Bill of Rights to federal Constitution. The second line, piece of cake, 10 amendments to guarantee individual rights. It doesn't say 9, and then the second's just for militia and hunting. Madison leads fight for passage. Pretty much says it all. And so when liberals say that it's just for militia and whatnot, they either are willfully ignorant or just ignorant, or take your pick. But all you have to do is look back in history and see what the founders wrote about the Second Amendment. Hell, Thomas Jefferson carried 2 pocket pistols, concealed carry, without a permit. Imagine that, for self-protection. He carried 2 pocket pistols, one in each coat pocket for self-protection. And these guys were, I wrote an article back in 2015 entitled, Gun Laws Were Different Back Then. And boy, howdy, this was a lot of fun to write. I cited some of the laws from colonial times, even well before the Revolution. All right? Here's just a couple of them. This is from the Massachusetts Bay Colony. You know Massachusetts, Ted Kennedy, Barney Frank, Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, John Kerry. These guys. This is from the Massachusetts Bay Colony back in the 1630s. The Massachusetts Bay Colony required that every able-bodied man own a weapon. In 1632, a Plymouth Colony statute ordered that, quote, every free man or other inhabitant of this colony provide for himself a sufficient musket, 2 pounds of powder, and 10 pounds of bullets. And if you didn't comply, they will fine you 10 shillings per person who was not armed. The order required that every town in the colony make sure that every person, servants included, be, quote, furnished with good and sufficient arms. This is Massachusetts, people. The residents had to reimburse the town. So this wasn't Obamacare or you get your free Obama phone or subsidized. The residents had to reimburse the town when they shall be able. In other words, the town would provide you with a firearm and you had to pay them back, or you could bring staples and stuff like corn and whatnot to sell, and they would sell it, and that's how you would pay them back. So you owned the weapon, they provided it to you, but you had to buy it from the town effectively. In 1650, Connecticut, liberal Connecticut. Now imagine how things have changed from then to now. It's just astonishing. And remember, keep in mind that they're trying to put the rifle statute 21. You can't anyone under the age of 21 can't own a rifle, right?
You know, let me say this. I'm okay with that on one condition.
Okay.
Everybody under the age of 21 in the military is released from service immediately.
Yeah, that'd go over like.
You know, if they can't carry a gun in Georgia, they can't carry one in Syria.
Yeah, wouldn't that be the ultimate insult? You're a 19-year-old kid. You've been in the service for at least a couple of years anyway. You've been deployed for a year over in some hellhole over in the Middle East or who knows, south of the border or wherever. And you come back and they say, sorry, son, you can't own a weapon. You sons of, unbelievable. But at any rate, okay, so bear in mind that in 1650, Connecticut passed a statute that every single resident above the age of 16 was required to be armed in Connecticut. And the Black Robe, remember the Black Robe Regiment?
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay, these guys, the radical revolutionary preachers, right? They actually required their parishioners to bring their guns to church, and then they would do military drills after the church services. So the preachers, these Black Robe Regiment preachers, would stand up there in front of these gentlemen, and any kid above 16 or 18 years old, and run military drills after they were preaching the gospel. I mean, that just ain't the best. That stuff is just awesome. How things have changed, particularly in New England, how they've gone from the ultimate in liberty to almost none. Now, New Hampshire, thankfully, we are still relatively the bastion of conservatism. As a matter of fact, we are able to, I open carry my sidearm. Everywhere I go, I open carry my sidearm. Never had, except for a couple of liberal professor-looking people at the grocery store who freak out, these old guys, the gray hair and the glasses and whatnot, and the disheveled suits. Other than that, I've never had a single look other than maybe a child asking me why I do what I do, and the parent would say, well, why don't you go ask him? And I explained that I'm one of the good guys. I am one of the sheepdog that will protect you because the police can't be everywhere. And if something were to happen in the grocery store or at the gas station or something like that, I'm the good guy that's going to protect you from the bad guys. And the kid nods their head and walks away satisfied. But those types of things are astounding to research and to write. And that's what I really enjoy, the history of the transformation, particularly in New England. But I digress. We now in New Hampshire, we're allowed to open carry or concealed carry without a permit.
Even concealed carry without a permit. That's amazing.
Yep.
And of course, that's the way it should be.
Yeah, and you know what? And the liberals, they were spastic over this. And the law is only about a year old, something like that. There hasn't been a single uptick of violence. Nothing. Right. Zippo. But you won't hear that from the mainstream media up here. They went dark as soon as they discovered that there wasn't going to be mass shootings everywhere and whatnot, and people, sneaking into banks and all of a sudden holding them up and shooting up the bank. Nothing like that occurred, so you hear nothing but crickets over it now.
Okay.
But it's thank heavens for that.
So then are the schools and things in New Hampshire, are they considered gun-free zones, or can the teachers carry as well?
Yeah, no. You can still get the signs posted. This is happily a gun-free zone or something like that. It's like, why don't you just put up a damn invitation? If you want to come shoot up a place, you're welcome here. Criminals welcome. and murderers welcome. It's just the silliest daggum thing I've ever heard of.
You know what's funny is, there's been talk about allowing teachers to conceal carry.
Yes.
Colorado's allowed that for 5 years, and the news media simply failed to report it.
Right. I think there's 7 or 8 states now, Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma, those states, who have allowed this for years. And in Texas, I think there are, out of 1,000 schools, I think there are 170 schools that allow for concealed carry, teachers concealed carry. And, well, not allow, but they currently do that. And there's never been a single incident in any one of those schools. I mean, it's logic. But hey, liberals' logic, they don't match.
Well, if you read my article in the American Free Press, the last issue of the American Free Press, out in California, they want to tear down William McKinley's statue.
Yes.
And I pointed that out, that the reason that they want to tear down McKinley's statue is because he's a racist and because he was cruel to the Indians. But if you look at the history, McKinley had appointed hundreds of black people to various federal posts that none of his predecessors had done. And he signed the Protection of Peoples on Indian Reservations Act. So again, facts don't matter to these people. They're just
and they never do. They absolutely never do. And that's the thing is that they get these. Well, and it's a lot of the times the Rush Limbaugh or Sean or somebody like that will do a montage of talking points where they'll get on a single topic. Have you ever heard the montage that Rush Limbaugh did on when Dick Cheney was proposed as George Bush's vice presidential running mate back in 2000?
If I heard it, I don't remember it.
Okay, well, it was the term gravitas, right? And that's the term that somebody coined the term gravitas, which gives a seriousness to the frat boy George Bush, right? So Dick Cheney was going to provide gravitas to the ticket. And so Rush had to have been at least 20 or 25 different liberal commentators, not radio, but TV and whatnot, and ran them all together where they all used the exact same terms in the exact same order. They didn't even try to hide that it was a talking point. And it's the funniest damn thing. And he does this kind of stuff all the time where they get these marching orders from someone, George Soros or something, I don't know who does, the Open Society. And it's just hilarious to listen to these people, and they say it with the exact same verbiage, the same inflection, in the same order. They don't even try to hide it. It's just unbelievable. And I have a relative of mine who is a flaming blanking liberal. Nice guy, love him to death, but he is a flaming liberal. And anytime we get into a political discussion, it always turns to talking points. It degrades to talking points. This guy is otherwise extremely intelligent, financial genius. But boy, I'll tell you, get him out of that element and into politics, and it's all just nothing but mindless talking points. It's just unbelievable.
And to kind of get back to what we were talking about a second ago.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll disagree with me, but my opinion is that the president has really about-faced on his campaign position on the Second Amendment.
Has he?
At least it would appear so.
Okay.
He's talking about banning bump stocks.
Right.
I think he was the one who originally brought up the idea of the age 21 limit.
Right.
And so he appears to be backpedaling his campaign position on the Second Amendment.
True enough, but what I was a cruise guy. It's the first presidential campaign I'd ever worked on.
Okay, I've got to ask you a question then. I've got to ask you a question.
Right.
Since you're the Common Constitutionalist. Okay.
Yep.
How did you resolve the natural born citizen clause of the Constitution to be able to support Ted Cruz?
Because his mom was an American citizen.
Right, but he was still born outside of one of the states, and so...
That's true. My brother was born in Frankfurt, Germany, man. right after the Korean War.
Okay.
But to American parents. So in my view, as long as one of the parents is an American citizen, the geography of where that person's born makes no difference. Okay? That's how I rectify it. But in any rate, so I was not a Trump guy. And I still don't like the bloviating Trump. I don't like the tweets. I don't like all the nonsense. But when I look at now Neal Gorsuch notwithstanding, because of the recent decision on immigration. Holy crap, have you heard that one?
No, I did not.
Oh, goodness. They wanted to make it easier to deport illegal aliens, particularly violent criminals. And Neal Gorsuch, the wonderful Trump appointee, voted in lockstep with the 4 liberals.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, and this just happened a few days ago. I'm going to be writing an article on it, maybe even tonight. I was just so disappointed, and I just so basically I've gone back to Clarence Thomas. He's my go-to conservative. He's the rock rib. He's the exact same as when he's not softened a bit from when he first came in to today. But getting back to Trump tweets a lot. I don't like it. I don't like the nonsense. I don't like the like I said, the bloviation. Just whatever, the back and forth and the aggressiveness of the tweets, whatever. It's just not for me. But when you look at what he tweets as opposed to what his policies end up being, I've grown accustomed to not giving an ounce of merit to what he tweets.
Okay.
He was in that room with Dianne Feinstein. If you saw that press conference where Trump was spouting off about we should do this against he didn't say against the Second Amendment, but the bump stock thing and the background check and everything. And you could see next to him Dianne Feinstein beaming she looked like the damn Joker. Her smile was so big. And she was beaming from ear to ear like, wow, we've really turned this Trump guy. How the hell did we do this? I don't care. But the point is that none of this crap has gone through. And none of it will go through. It's all stuck in the House, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Well, you say that the lame duck governor of Florida managed to get it through his state.
Right, but that's
and he hid it in another bill.
But that's not Trump, though. Well, yeah, but that's what's his name? I never liked the guy from Florida anyway. He's an establishment hack, in my opinion.
Right. Well, what everybody seems to be forgetting about Rick Scott was the man literally became a multimillionaire before he was a politician.
Right.
By defrauding the Medicare and Medicaid systems. If anything, he probably needs to pardon himself before he leaves office.
Right. Well, you would. I mean, he's destined for the next Republican administration on that. Yeah. But again, I've grown to be able to. I now separate Trump's rhetoric from his policies.
Okay.
Because the policies don't match the rhetoric. And again, he's one of these guys that I honestly think that he may have actually done this on purpose just to see the expression on Dianne Feinstein's face. Because it was priceless. You got to go back and watch this press conference. It was like, they were all set up like the Last Supper. But the point is that the omnibus bill that he signed, notwithstanding, which was a complete and utter disaster, his policies never seem to match his rhetoric. He'll spout off about something, and then he'll come back, and the policies that he actually promotes are conservative policies. So I don't worry about once his policies start matching his rhetoric, like this spouting off, then we got a serious problem. But right now, I don't lend much credence to it.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are because you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net.
Well, I know that we talked a little bit about some of your more recent writing, but is there any other blogs that you've written recently or that you're kind of working on right now that you want to talk about? Or?
Certainly the Gorsuch thing. I mean, I can't believe the disappointment that I have that that he sided with all. I mean, just the fact. I don't even care what I haven't read his opinion, and actually it wasn't Sotomayor, it was Elena Kagan who wrote the majority opinion. Holy crap. I mean, come on. But just the fact that he sided with 4, let's just call them socialists. I don't even know what you want to call them. Radical leftists, Obama rubber stamps, whatever, is very worrisome to me. That there's no standing, and every single one of the dissenting justices apparently wrote a dissenting opinion, which is very uncommon. They usually, one justice will write the majority opinion, and one justice will be kind of like elected or chosen to write the minority opinion or the dissenting opinion. From what I understand, and I haven't read this thing because it's bloody long, all 4 justices that dissented wrote their own opinions.
Wow.
And apparently Clarence Thomas's is the best. So I have to find that and read it. But the Gorsuch thing is a big deal to me. It's a huge deal. I'm hoping it's a one-off, but boy, I don't know. This really concerns me that we really thought we had a rock-ribbed Clarence Thomas conservative. Constitutionalist, not conservative. Conservative doesn't mean anything, really. A rock-ribbed constitutionalist, originalist, and it appears that maybe we don't, because anyone who sides with these radical liberal justices can't possibly own fealty to the Constitution. Impossible.
So do you think that he's going to become another Roberts? In other words, he's the guy who's supposed to be the conservative but ends up being the swing vote?
Well, actually, I think with Roberts, who's actually, I mean, most of the time he will side with the conservatives. I think that somebody's got some naked photos of the guy or something. I don't know what else could it be with Obamacare. I mean, how could he let him off the hook like that? I mean, unless somebody went to him and, Eric Holder came and said, it'd be a shame if these photographs got out. I don't know what the hell to think. Something happened to this guy because he was originally against the Obamacare mandate. And then he's just flipped on a dime. So I don't know about Roberts, but I don't know. There's nothing we can do about it anyway. We just got to hope for the best for Gorsuch. And eventually one of these other old fossils has to retire. It's got to be Ginsburg next, right?
I was going to say, was it Kennedy that I read the other day is contemplating retirement at the end of the year?
He's been doing it. I've been reading that, and I actually wrote about it maybe 18 months ago, that he's been contemplating retirement. Well, I mean, Ginsburg, what is she, 108 in the shade or something?
Well, this was 15 years ago. This was 15 years ago now, or more. Let's see, this was 2001.
Yeah.
And so this was what, 16 years ago.
Yeah, right.
That in the case of United States versus Indianapolis Baptist Temple was at the Supreme Court. And let's just say that it was nothing more than 30 minutes of oral arguments.
Right.
And during those 30 minutes, Ginsburg both did a crossword puzzle and took a nap.
Yeah,
she couldn't even stay awake for 30 minutes 16 years ago.
16 years ago. Yeah, I know. She just, and it's I guess the stunning thing about it is that how close her and Scalia were personally, that they vacationed together, their families, and they did all sorts of stuff, but they couldn't have been further on opposite scale. That you couldn't get any further apart than them politically or constitutionally. But you're right. I think Kennedy has been contemplating it, and I've heard that he's finally going to do this summer. because he doesn't think he can hold out until after Trump leaves, or maybe they don't think Trump's going to be going anywhere.
Right.
So, so he may be the next one up. And the Gorsuch thing was an easy deal because it was a 1-for-1. The Scalia's gone, and you get another, hopefully, conservative in there, constitutionalist in there. So that's a 1-for-1 deal. That's why there wasn't a death cage match type of thing. You wait for the bloodshed, the bloodletting with this next one. If it's Kennedy, if it's one of these liberal justices that go, the hue and cry from the left, you will not believe what's going to happen. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see anything like it, because they know that this is what hinges the entire nation, which is the sad part. When you think about it, the judicial branch, the Black Robe oligarchs, they rule us. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is it's something that was dropped off of the Bill of Rights. If you recall, the original Bill of Rights, the first draft of the original Bill of Rights were 17 amendments. Most of them made it through to the second draft and to the final draft, and they were consolidated into the 10 amendments. One that didn't make it through, that sure as crap should have, in retrospect, it sure should have, was the 16th Amendment. Let me read this to you. Speaking of the judicial branch and what they do. Quote, the powers delegated by the Constitution to the government of the United States shall be exercised as therein appropriated, so that the legislative shall never exercise the powers vested in the executive or judicial, nor the executive the powers vested in the legislative or judicial, nor the judicial powers vested in the legislative or executive. Shall never. The problem we've got today is not the takeover of power from the legislative giving power away to the executive branch taking power away from the legislative branch, or the judicial branch taking power away from the legislative branch. The legislative branch always gets the short shift. They are giving their power away unconstitutionally, which is, in my opinion, this 16th article should have been through. And if it did go through, that would dictate to the legislative branch that you will not, cannot, and shall not give away your power to the executive branch. If you have a tough decision to make, you can't just leave it to the president and say, here you go, you now have the power of X or Y, we grant you that authority. They don't have any constitutional authority to give their authority away. And that's effectively what they've done for decades now, is that the executive and judicial branches have not wrested authority away from the legislative. Legislative branch has willingly given it up because they're too cowardly to make the right and the tough decisions. That's my opinion. And that's why this Article 16 stood out so broadly to me, was that it specifically said, and this was from the Anti-Federalists, I guarantee you this was a George Mason type of deal, you shall not share your authority. You cannot, under any circumstances, give your authority away to another branch. And that's effectively what they've done, is they voluntarily, the legislative branch has given authority away to the president, and now President X or President Y, all you got to do is write an executive order or an executive action, and it de facto somehow becomes a law. And the judicial branch the same way. You can just make up laws and tell them that anything's unconstitutional, and then just take it from there. I just thought that was absolutely fascinating, which is another reason why we need the Article 5 Convention of States, to get something like that back in.
Well, I know Sean Hannity, Mark Levine, some of these guys talk a lot about the Convention of States.
Yep.
And let me tell you what my fear is that as soon as we open this up, that all of the liberals will also have their open door to do whatever they've wanted to do for however many years.
That's true. Now, that's the difference between an amendment process that goes through the federal legislative process and the states. The states have to have two-thirds of the states have to be able to have to vote just to convene an Article 5 convention of the states. 2/3 have to be able to agree to convene an Article 5 convention of states. The federal government has absolutely zero say in the matter. The legislative, the judicial, the Supreme Court can't come up and say, sorry, you can't do this. They've got no standing. Nobody in the federal government has any standing. So 2/3 of the states have to get together just to convene, which is why it's taken so bloody long. And then in order to do an amendment or rewrite anything, 3/4 of the states have to be able to agree to do that. The odds of that happening with liberal bias is almost zero. I trust the people a hell of a lot more than I trust our damn federal government. And so that's why I'm a huge advocate for the Convention of States, because all it would take is a handful of states to say no dice, and it's going to be no dice. And that's the way the founders wanted it, is that if all else fails, the people can wrest the government back from the feds.
So how does somebody go about finding your website and your writing?
Okay, website is thecommonconstitutionalist.com. And you can find my writing at WorldNet Daily, occasionally Daily Caller, any Liberty Alliance site, many Tea Party sites the Tea Party Network publishes. It all originates at thecommonconstitutionalist.com. And then I've got some friends, like I said, at the Freedom Outpost, at several different Liberty Alliance, at Conservative Truth, at the WorldNet Daily, occasional Daily Caller. Tulsa World magazine, online magazine, publishes all my stuff. I don't know why, they just do. Lots of other different, minor sites that just pick up my stuff. Legal Insurrection, American Conservative, things like that.
Do you kind of see what you're doing as continued soldiering or continued military service, even though you're not really in the military? You're still fighting the cultural war, protecting the country from all enemies, foreign and domestic? And
well, I'm trying like hell. How's that? Yes, absolutely. And the thing is that what I did want to tell your viewers is that you can do this. Hell, if I can, this is why I call myself the Common Constitutionalist, because there ain't nothing special about me, brother.
Right.
I mean, I am the Common Constitutionalist. All this stuff I do is all self-taught. You don't learn this crap in school. Even back when I went to school, you don't learn this stuff. You learn about Woodrow Wilson and FDR and how great they were, right?
Right.
But you certainly don't learn about this stuff. So there's nothing special about me. So if I can do it, you can do it. But as far as getting involved, get involved. Call, as far as the government, call people. Call your congressman's office. Call your senator's office. Don't text. Don't email. Make somebody answer the daggum phone and talk to you. Don't be mean. Don't be aggressive. Just get your point across. I don't like this, or thank you for this. I have called congressmen across and senators across the nation to either bitch at them or say thank you for doing what you do. Mike Lee, Ted, the usual guys that I call and I thank. I call them on the phone. Rarely do I ever get to speak with them, although I've met Ted Cruz on a number of occasions, so I've been able to speak to him a few times. Get involved. Run for local office if you can. I've had a number of people wanting me to run for office. I couldn't get elected dog catcher, brother, and I've got more skeletons in my closet than Jeffrey Dahmer. So no thank you. I'll keep doing what I do. I'll keep calling. I'll keep writing articles, and I'll keep, prodding people into trying to get things done. But just get involved. Don't just give to, if somebody wants you to donate to their campaign, don't just donate. If you want to do something, volunteer for the next campaign. I don't care if you don't think this guy's got a chance in hell of winning. If you believe in him, volunteer and learn something about the process. And that's not a bad thing. The more you can learn, actually, the more you learn, the more screwed up you know the process to be, and maybe you can set about trying to fix it like the rest of us. That's what I say to everybody that I meet. Just get involved somehow. If you don't want to write or podcast or talk online like we do, volunteer for something. Call, bitch, congratulate. Do whatever you do, but stay involved, stay focused. That's what I'd say.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week's TBR Radio Presents, the Dixie Heritage Hour. I want to thank you for being our guest and for taking your time to join us for this broadcast. I hope that you'll join us again next week. And until then, may God richly bless.